I'm not looking at you, Ami. Just be conscious of how much champagne you're consuming on an empty stomach. I'm just going to put that out there.
I'm just saying, have a snack
Nothing
before
to do
the
with
wedding.
You, Ami. It just came to the top of my mind. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Need to Know. I'm your host, Gemma Stafford, cookbook author, professional chef, and the creator of Bigger, Bolder Baking. And as always, I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Ami Shukla. Did you like that?
Happy to be here.
Now, there's nothing you can say about that intro.
No,
it wasn't sarcastic.
It was finally
it was heartfelt.
Appropriate.
Now, I'm going to not to dig too deep into it, but I don't work with many people, so it's not hard to be my esteemed colleague.
Oh my gosh.
It's you and Kevin.
Well, you know.
Oh, okay, Ami.
Fine.
What are we talking about? What are we vibing on this week, Ami?
Gemma, I would like us to start out hot from the oven and talk about Labubus. Do you know what a Labubu is?
No, what?
Okay. A Labubu is this viral plush toy. It's like a little doll.
The dolls.
Yeah.
So kind of creepy looking dolls?
Yeah, they're kind of like mischievous, elvish looking. They're kind of like little monsters.
Yeah.
It was created by the artist Casing Lung. And
I feel like I've only seen these guys recently.
Well, I think it's just like gotten to
a lot.
Yes. So they're around a lot, and I think what happens is people will buy them. They only have a limited supply. I think this is what's going on, and then people will buy them up and then sell them on the secondary market for like a lot more money.
No way.
And then people go crazy for them. You know, they retail from like anywhere from like $27 to like around $170 or something like that. But there are limited edition Labubus that are sold on like eBay for like, there's one that was sold for like $10,000.
Gosh.
Because that's what someone felt was like something they wanted. That I feel like that's like sort of the extent of my knowledge. But why am I bringing this up on our podcast?
Why?
Is because it is now Labubus have infiltrated the online baking market here, and they are so there are all these people online who are making Labubu cakes or Labubu baked goods. So there's a lot of Labubu baking online. You can check out Lex Bakes Dulce, who has 21,000 followers, to see what she's done. You can also check out At Every Last Crumb, who's a cake decorator with 247,000 followers, who's also gotten into Labubu baking. But my most favorite one that I've already watched like 10 times now is at Kelly Cooks What, which is, I guess her site is about funny baking fails. But you have to watch what happens when she tries to bake a Labubu cake. It is very short and very, very funny.
She has 750,000 views on this video, so I'm going to have to. So we're going to share that video.
Yeah, and some of those are my views. It's pretty excellent. It's really like funny. You know, it's funny what captures people's imaginations. You know, what's in the world, and and how bakers respond to it. We talked a few episodes ago about Jaws and baking and the shark baking. You know, like what people pick up on and think like, oh, well, I'm going to make a cake or a cupcake or some sort of treat based on this.
I have to say, I am surprised at the breadth of the audience that these guys have, because looking at it, I've seen it recently on like people's handbags and stuff. And I think I would have thought it was maybe teenage girls or tween girls, boys. And I'm seeing grown men in LA, like having a cup of coffee in a cafe with it like on their keychain.
Really?
Yeah.
People are like into it. People like things. Like if you're a things person, you want to collect something, you think it's cute or funny. There was something like a while ago called an ugly doll. Do you remember the Ugly Dolls?
I do.
It was like
briefly.
UGLI, Ugly Dolls. And that was like a big thing. I don't know if that they got to Labubu fame, and, I don't know if people coveted them in that way, but like really a big thing.
I remember that. That was odd. I wondered what those things were.
I don't know. I think people just kind of like these sort of like monstrous, kind of cute, ugly, cute. They're not cute. Actually, they're cute. They're not ugly at all, but just like that kind of like.
They are cute.
Mischievous,
And some people, like Kevin is one of these people who like, they follow like a certain brand or a certain character and like will get all into it. Like I never did that. When I was young, I never followed a band. I never followed a trend. I never dressed in like fashionable clothes.
Aw.
I know, right? But I never was that person. I never kind of went all in on anything, you
Right.
know? And some people really do. And then they buy the t-shirts and they buy all the swag and
Yes.
and they go and then they'll do it for like different like franchises.
Right.
So I get it. They are cute. I have to say they are kind of cute. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, I wish I thought of that idea.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
whatever you think of it, she's like, I wish I thought of that idea. So here's something that came up. I thought this was interesting. Remember when we had my mom on the podcast and she told us, we were talking about cakes. We're talking about different types of wedding cakes and things like that. And she told us about the wedding cake that she did for my sister and actually for somebody else. And it was wheels of cheese.
Yes. Yeah.
And I remember when she did it, this was years ago. My mom must have done this like 14, 15 years ago. So get this, my mom and Stanley Tucci have a 6 degrees of separation. And that is a cheese wedding cake. So he got married and he married, actually, this is so funny, Emily Blunt's sister.
Right.
Did you know that?
Yeah, I did know that.
How did you know that?
I don't know. I watched some video. I don't know why I know that. Don't ask me these things.
Oh, sorry. So anyway, he married Emily Blunt's sister. And for their wedding cake, they opted for the wheels of cheese wedding cake rather than a traditional sweet wedding cake. He's interesting to follow on social, actually. He hosts some great food shows, beautifully shot. I do trust him in the world of food and delicious beverages. And I thought that was really interesting. And the fun thing is, he does a partnership with San Pellegrino and using Murray's Cheese, who are based out of New York. I'm sure you've had that before. Yeah. He collaborated with them to make his own cheese cake for celebrations. They say it's for holidays, it's for Thanksgiving, it's for get-togethers. They're not huge, but they're definitely for groups of people. You can find it on murraycheese.com. They're selling it now. It's $85. I want to say it is 3 layers, but I will warn you, they're not huge. If you were inclined to make your own, you could make it for a lot cheaper and decorate it like my mum did with some ivy, some rosemary. My mum made these little mice figures out of what we call at home mala, or like it was an air drying clay. Make it really pretty, some flowers and things like that. But I thought that was really cute.
That was really sweet. So I just have some questions about this. Just if you're to, so you're
sorry, no questions.
Aww. Well,
no, because your questions always stump me. Okay, what's your question?
No question. So you you have this like wedding cheese cake, and you obviously want to start with a harder cheese on the bottom, and then increasing, but like, when you're making a multi-tiered cake, you have to have supports within your multi-tiered cake. For the cheese wheels, do you just rest the cheese wheels right on top?
You rest you rest them on top.
They don't need any supports or anything because the cheese is hard.
You can do a cake board.
Yeah.
But there's nothing supporting, there's no dowel.
Right.
As far as I've seen. My mom didn't do anything that was incredibly soft, was only kind of towards the top.
Right on top.
And everything else was firmer. They do recommend that you obviously start from firmest to softest.
Right.
Don't go too crazy with the soft cheeses. And it said, which is I think is a good recommendation, between each wheel, give around 4 to 8 inch size difference between the wheels, just to make sure you don't go too heavy on top.
Yeah.
Weigh the wheels of cheese.
Right.
If you have a digital scales like the way we do, and just make sure nothing is too ripe.
Right.
And note, I literally just thought of this. I adore, for those cheese lovers out there, who doesn't love cheese that's been sitting out for like 4 hours? It's like the most delicious thing in the world, right?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the cheese. Mostly. When they're harder cheeses, for sure.
But I my cheese has to be sitting out for a good few hours before I eat it. Saying that, if you're making a wedding cake or you're doing it for a Thanksgiving or a holiday celebration, do leave it out, but you just factor in, if it's been sitting out for 8 hours, you want to make sure nothing is too overripe and the rooms get warm and like whatever. So just factor that in.
And then for decoration, you would like throw on fruit on there, dried fruit.
You could do dried berries, because also then that becomes the accompaniment.
Right, like what you would eat. Like, what do you think? You could drizzle it with honey?
You could drizzle it with honey. You could do crackers on the side, and then different types of dried fruit, and get fancy with your fruit, because you already did a cheesecake, right?
Oh, you're telling me to get fancy. You're telling me to get fancy.
You're already telling people you're fancy with your cake made of cheese, Ami. It's all there in the cake.
Can I tell you a story?
What is it? What is it?
to tell you a story.
Okay.
I don't know if this is a warning or a story, but just I went to a wedding when I was like in my early 20s. And I was vegetarian at the time. And at the reception, it was all just past hors d'oeuvres. Like there was no sit-down dinner. And it was like beef on a stick or, shrimp cocktail.
Chicken satay.
It was just, I know it was just all, it was all like just kind of past, and everything was meat except for like some like raw vegetables. And I was so hungry. And then on a table, I saw this giant cheesecake and I thought, oh God, okay, fine. I'll just like take a big slice of that and I'll just have dessert for dinner. And I took literally a large wedge and then stuck my fork in it and took a giant bite of cheese. And it was cheese. Like it was like just a single, like a giant wheel of cheese.
Oh.
And I was so surprised. So I just think that people should know that they're eating cheese when they're going for a slice of cake.
I'm not, how do I put this lightly? I would assume that most people would know they were cutting into.
I was ravenous. In my defense, there was like a caramel topping on it, and there was fruit on it. Like there was like some like sort of sweetie sauce. It was all dressed up. I thought it was a piece of cake.
Here's a warning for people going to weddings, just in general. Be careful. Like, just maybe don't have too much. I'm not looking at you, Ami. Just be conscious of how much champagne you're consuming on an empty stomach. I'm just going to put that out there.
I'm just saying, have a snack before the wedding.
You, Ami. It just came to the top of my mind.
I was very surprised by the cheese. I was very surprised by the cheese. I think if I had known I was
it really caramel or was it actually honey? Once
it was
you realized?
Something sweet. It was some sweet
honey.
I don't know what it was. I don't know. I was just traumatized by thinking I was eating cheesecake and it was actually a piece of cheese.
However, no, but not feeding people at a wedding is a big no-no.
No, people ate. It was just
you can't. No finger food. I mean, you need to sit down and eat.
Yeah, it was. Maybe it was fun for some people. It was a beautiful wedding, but it was. I ate an apple in my hotel room later on.
Are they still together?
Don't know. I'm no longer with the boyfriend who took me to that wedding.
Oh,
so,
there you go.
Who knows? Well, Gemma, on that note, I'm going to pivot us away from cheesy wedding cakes, and it's time for In the Mix.
Okay.
It's getting a little colder. There's a little wonderful nip in the air, and it starts to make me think of this Danish concept called hygge. Do you know about this?
Hygge. No, that's a fun word.
Yeah, hygge. It's actually not pronounced the way it's spelled for Americans. It's spelled Hygge. This is a Danish idea. And there's no real English translation. So I have a friend who lives in Denmark, and I just contacted him and I was like, can you tell me exactly what hygge is? And I wanted to just ask about hygge and baking. And according to him, he said, hygge is when you get together, talk, laugh, and cuddle up. Cozy is probably the best direct translation. Mm-hmm. So, and it isn't just about food. It's really about just creating an atmosphere of togetherness, community, coziness. Oftentimes, food is involved. So there's a real, so when I talked to him about like, well, if you were to, how does baking fall into hygge? He said, well, he gave me a Danish word, which I'm not going to say out loud, but the direct translation is
the bold.
It's very, I'm just definitely not going to say it correctly, but it means afternoon coffee. And so it's just a time when people get together. And he said, this is a time when we all get together, definitely with coffee and tea and cake. You don't have to eat these to have create a sense of hygge, but like classic Danish desserts or cakes that you would have with afternoon coffee, having that social time with friends or family. There's one called Brunsviger, which is like a yeasted brown sugar caramel topped coffee cake. So it's just looks like yeasted, almost like a focaccia, like a yeasted bread, and has this kind of sweet caramel top. Not super sweet, but with this really lovely topping. Another one that's very classic is called a Danish dream cake, which is just a vanilla sponge cake. And then you have, again, like a butter, brown sugar, and coconut topping that goes right on top. And then the other one that he said was the most ubiquitous, this is probably the most eaten, is this Danish strawberry pie. And how it's made is you make a crust out of a marzipan, you have marzipan in the crust, like a short bread, but with marzipan, layered with a thin layer of
Danish
chocolate. Yeah, I know. Yeah. So then a thin layer of chocolate, vanilla pastry cream, and then fresh strawberries on top.
Lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of these things.
The different textures.
Yeah.
So So let me just get my head around that. Hygge
Yeah.
is kind of a ritual around a sweet baked good and coffee.
Not necessarily, but if you were to create a ritual around baking, it would be like kind of that. So the word itself can be traced back to the Middle Ages, where there's a similar Old Norse word that means protected from the outside world.
Oh.
So it's like, you know, when you think about like the climate in Denmark, you know, especially, you know, when I'm sure the summers are gorgeous and then it kind of gets cold and dark and it's, you know, pretty far up north. So there's probably a lot of, you know, not a lot of sunlight. And so there's, I think there's just something in Danish culture that, you know, really promotes this sense of well-being, camaraderie, community. And that is not looked at. I feel like there's a real American sensibility that can be like that is a luxury. Mm-hmm. Whereas in other cultures, and I think not just Denmark, but there's other cultures where that is looked at as a necessity.
Yeah.
That's a part of life and it's something very important to well-being and health of your community and health of individual personal health.
That's lovely. And it strikes a chord with me for sure, coming from a country that is very dark and cold and the majority of the year raining.
Yeah.
So it's nice that they kind of like embrace that part of, you know, where they're from, that like it's a big part of their culture. Like in Ireland, the weather is such a big part of how we go about our day, what we eat, how we live our lives.
Absolutely.
As a child, we lots of times had to stay indoors because it was lashing rain outside.
Right.
But I like how they kind of turned it into something good and positive, like during this colder time, creating a sense of warmth inside your home.
And I think it can, you know, weather can be very isolating.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I definitely feel like, you know, we just came off of an extremely hot spell of like hot weather in LA. And all I want to do is be inside in my house with my air conditioning on. I don't want to go outside. So I feel like that hot is like the LA equivalent of bad weather. But I grew up in Connecticut and I do remember there being like all these like just very long cold winters and you just go inside, you don't want to leave the house. So having a sort of a cultural ideology of like being together and making that cozy, making that, you know, being under blankets together, lighting a fire, lighting candles, having something warm in the oven that smells good, you know, and having a cup of coffee, not just a functional cup of coffee because you need an afternoon pick-me-up, but taking a moment with it, having a little treat. You've got Irish, like tea time, right?
We have tea time. We have 11s, which is the morning time. And then I personally, and this is often the case for a lot of people, is afternoon tea. I have tea in the afternoon. I do that on the daily. It's view, and then like with it, you'd often have biscuits. Like I talk a lot about like having biscuits and stuff, and like, you know, we would have like dry biscuits. We talked about this recently in an episode where we talked about smell and taste linking, more so smell actually, we figured out, linking to emotions, and that actually been to the closest link to the emotions part of your brain more than any other sense.
Right.
And food is all the things. It's all the senses. It's taste, it's sight, it's smell, it's touch. But something I learned recently, and I never heard this before, and it makes perfect sense, but I never knew the word. Have you ever heard of a flow activity?
Like, was that sort of like being in the flow or something?
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
So psychologists have this name called a flow activity, calling it something that when you like doing this action or this task or whatever it is almost like it is very peaceful, very mindful, and very meditative. And that's a flow activity. So like think about exercising. Exercising is a flow activity. Yoga, Pilates, like lots of people have different things. Sometimes people have different ways that they like to like kind of wind down and relax.
Right.
And baking is a flow activity where people engage a different part of their brain and just kind of delve into a different world, you know, which is usually peaceful, and they get to shape doughs and to mix batters. And then the sound, I didn't talk about sound of baking, cracking eggs, the beating, the machine, all of those things.
Yeah.
Only as I'm saying it out loud now, baking really does. It's really good for your mental health, unless you find baking stressful.
Yeah.
Hopefully you don't.
Right.
Maybe if you do, then maybe try a different recipe, because there's lots of stuff that isn't stressful, but it really is good for your mental health.
Yeah.
I cook often when I'm stressed because I bake for work. I cook when I'm stressed, and I find that does the same thing.
Yeah.
Where I'd also the thing, same with baking and cooking, is at the end of it, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a reward at the end. And then there's something that often people don't even taste themselves, but will share with loved ones. And we talk about love languages before and all this sort of stuff. So it really does tick all the boxes.
I think it's also like, it's nice that like, you know, when you think about like the flow activity of like baking, there's like all that, the sensory stuff. I do find baking and cooking and just being in the kitchen to be a very communal activity. Like I'm often in the kitchen by myself because my kids are busy, you know, and my husband doesn't like to cook. And so like, and I don't mind being by myself, but when I have other family members or I have friends over and we're all sitting in the kitchen together, it's my favorite thing. It makes me so happy when I'm able to cook and talk. So it's not solitary for me. So I love this whole idea of like community around food.
Yeah.
And I know one thing, if you're listening and, you know, you have, you know, I'm sure if you're listening, you are a baker yourself or, you know, interested in food. But if you have someone, you know, if you find yourself alone a lot but would like community, one of the things that my husband does sometimes is he'll be sitting somewhere reading and he'll read an article that he thinks, oh, I'm going to really love this. And he'll come in and he'll read out loud to me.
Oh, no way.
While I'm cooking. And he hasn't done this in a while, so I'm going to have to remind him of this. But he used to definitely, like when we had more time when the kids were younger or there were no kids, he would just sit in the kitchen and read to me and like, oh, this is this great article. And like the whole time it would be some long article in the New Yorker or something. And it was so wonderful, you know, like that was just like, I got to listen to a story. He got to be with me. I got to do my thing. And we got to have this like lovely space that really felt like hygge, that felt like cozy and communal just between the two of us. So there's lots of ways to connect around that, even if you find yourself doing it mostly as a solitary activity. Maybe you choose that. Maybe that's something for you, you know, as your own personal time. But if you, like me, crave more community, you know, within that, it's a really nice way to do it.
Lovely. Yeah, I love that. I like, I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah.
I like you drop a little bit of culture on us, Ami. I learned a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I wish we had this more as like something that we honor, a space that we honor, you know, taking the time to sit down together, be together, and why this is good for us. I think in Sweden, there's a ritual called fika, which is like afternoon coffee.
Yeah.
Italy has their own culture. Japan has their own version of this. I think there's just places in the world, you know, I feel like we have something to learn. And I think we could bring this, especially going into the colder winter months, just remembering to find beauty in that.
Yeah, I do. I love the winter. I love the cold. I love everything because it reminds me of Ireland.
Yeah.
I asked George one day, actually, no, George, this is so George. He said, I was raining and I was like, oh, look, it's raining. And he said to me, do you like the rain? Mm-hmm. And he's always asking questions like this. And I said, I do, because it reminds me of Ireland. And he said, yeah, me too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cozy, right? Like kind of listening to the rain outside and like knowing you're inside. It's very like, it's a really wonderful feeling.
It has a smell, and then like the cold, and there's the fires lighting.
Yeah.
And it was really nice.
Yeah, that was nice.
Thank you, Ami.
I feel cozy now.
I feel cozy now too.
Especially my warm sweater. Let's see.
Let's go have some Bailey's hot chocolates.
Yes. Oh my God, we should have done this episode.
And get cozy and toasty.
And a blanket.
Ami, let's move into the Bold Baking Hotline. And I have one question for you, because you are the expert. You're the only person I know who knows about hygge, so you're my expert. Before the holiday rush kicks in, I want to have an afternoon chilling out and doing some relaxing baking. This reminds me of chilling out, relaxing and cooling. What are some good hygge recipes? This is Ruth from Facebook.
Oh, well, you know, slow baking. I mean, I think classically we think about like baking bread.
Yeah.
For sure. Just taking the time to knead, the smell of the baking bread. It's a big loaf you can share with people. Baking Baking pies is always like, again, it's just something like it smells good and you've got to let it cool for a while. So you have this time when you're enjoying just the smell and anticipation of that, which can be really lovely. I think sometimes just slower bakes, things that just maybe take a little while. Or you could even just do like, which is a little quicker, but like any kind of a quick bread smells, they're all often, like something with some good spices in them. Like
I definitely would lean towards the spices, definitely, because we talked about, remember, evoking those memories.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to throw one into the hat there, and this is what does it for me. Is crock pot recipes, savory, yes, but my sweet crock pot desserts, including my gingerbread in a crock pot.
Oh yeah,
that is Hygge vibes.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Oh yeah, you're going to be smelling that for hours. It's going to smell good, and then it's going to be really
soft.
Warm
it gets better the next day.
Yeah,
you have to have a tub of vanilla ice cream. That's on biggerbolderbaking.com. That is the recipe for the season.
Yes,
it's not the most attractive looking. It's very easy to make, but it is so delicious.
Yeah. So cozy.
That's lovely. Thank you, Ami.
Thank you, Gemma. I feel like I'm ready to, put on another sweater and get some cozy baking
double
going
sweater
on.
It. Ami's going to double sweater it. Start a new trend. Thank you, Ami. Lovely as always.
Absolutely.
And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I know I did. Thank you very much for tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe wherever you watch and listen to your podcasts. And I'll see you back here again really soon. Take care. From HRN and the Bold Baking Network, you are watching the Need to Know Baking Entertainment podcast.